First of all, it's reminded to you that the theme, if we can call it a theme, for our gatherings together during this time, is the death of love, the passage to the absence of illusion. It's not a doorway, it's a passage to the absence of illusion. King Solomon, we know, was a great, great king. He had great powers. He could call the birds from the sky. He knew the language of the animals. He had great wisdom. And there was an occasion when he invited the monarchs, the kings and queens of the countries surrounding his own kingdom to a great feast. And after feting all of these monarchs, he said to them, I am a great king. I have great wisdom. I want to prove my wisdom to you. My wisdom is in this statement. Love is the greatest power of all. All the kings that were gathered laughed at him. Of course, they'd attained their kingdoms by means of conquering others. But he said, I will prove it to you. Far away, there is an island, and I will build a tower on that island. And there I will place my beloved daughter, and we shall see. So he called his beloved daughter to him and explained that he was sending her away, building her a tower in which she must stay. She was very distressed after living in a grand palace, servants surrounding her, luxuries all around, to contemplate the loneliness of a great tower sent her heart down to her toes. But it was done. Artisans were sent, and the great tower was built on the remote island. King Solomon's daughter was taken there on the back of King Solomon's great white eagle. But he said, my beloved daughter, I will send a nightingale to entertain you, and every day my white eagle will bring delicacies from the palace for your repasts. So it was done. The princess was placed in the tower. The nightingale came each day to sing to her. She wept a great deal. Her loneliness knew no bounds. But in a far-off place there was a merchant who had a son who he loved very dearly. He was a widow. His wife had died some time ago, and his son had grown to manhood without a mother. But his son often beseeched him, "Please, Father, I want to make a journey. I want to see the world." But the merchant said no. He was deathly afraid. His wife had drowned when they were out sailing in a great vessel. He was deathly afraid that if he allowed his son also to go to the ocean, fate would be not good for him. But the son begged and begged until finally the merchant said he would allow his son to take his journey, to make his adventures. But before his son embarked, the merchant brought to him a small box. And when the son opened the box, there inside was a ruby serpent, so dazzling. Its glow blinded the young man. His father said to him that this ruby serpent had been bought in a far-off land and was said to have great power. He gave it to his son, and his son embarked on his journey. But they had not travelled very far when suddenly a storm came up and the ship was sinking. The servant who the merchant had sent with his son tied the young man to the mast, and the young man put a band around his waist with the precious ruby serpent inside, and the ship went down. But the mast was broken off, so the young man was floating on this broken mast, clinging for his life. He thought that all was lost, but just when he felt that he could not cling any more, a great white eagle came down and lifted him up, carrying him to an island which seemed to be completely barren. The eagle flew off, leaving the young man seemingly to his fate. But this young man sought and found berries to eat and water to drink. He began to traverse the island, but there was nothing until suddenly, there in front of him was the tower. And he thought, this must be some bastion for some monarch. But when he drew closer and looking up at its great height, there he saw the princess, her long raven hair falling down her back, looking out and obviously listening, because the young man heard it also, the sound of the nightingale in a branch of a great oak tree that stood beside the tower. he was smitten. Immediately he fell in love. But how to reach her? The walls of the tower were shining with no means of ascension. The tree was a giant tree, but also there seemed no means for him to climb, to reach the parapet in which the beautiful maiden princess stood. And then he remembered the ruby serpent. Had his father not told him that it was magic? So taking it from its sash around his belt, he opened up the box, and immediately the ruby serpent fell to the ground. But then, before his very eyes, a huge serpent snake appeared from amongst the trees. And as he observed, the serpent wound itself around the tree, making a ladder. But before doing so, it took the ruby serpent in its mouth. The young man was able to climb like a stairway up the great oak tree until he reached the place in which the princess stood. And again the serpent reached out its head and made a bridge across which the young man could walk. And in a trice he was standing before the beautiful maiden. She looked at him and said, "You've come." And she too immediately fell in love. Now, King Solomon, sending his great white bird each day with food, noticed that the next day the bird was taking several portions of food. And so, taking an entourage of his courtiers, they made their way to the tower. And there, of course, to the great delight of King Solomon, he found the two lovers. They were taken back to King Solomon's palace, where a great wedding feast was arranged. All the kings and queens of the various countries around who had attended the feast some time before were invited to the wedding. And again, after the feasting and the wedding ceremonies, King Solomon stood before them and said, "Did I not say that love was the greatest power of all?" All who were present could not but agree when they saw the two lovebirds gazing into the eyes of each other, absolutely and totally besotted and smitten in love. What has this story to do with our passage? But by now, you know the way of stories. Does not have a question. We have our own knowing. Arriving here, it can only be when we have united, merged within us the three levels of existence. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Existence, knowledge, and bliss. The level of life where karma exists, the toing and froing, the cause and effect. That level of intuition, dreams, archetypes. And that level where we can look out at life and know our relationship with all that we can see and experience. Only when these three are together can we take the passageway that takes us to the absence.